You mentioned the siege. Was that quite a big thing for the SAS?
Yeah, the one good thing about the SAS is nobody brags or tells war stories.
Okay.
So I remember we were in Ireland at the time when we heard the siege had happened, and we were all just so sick that we weren't on it.
Right.
Jealous. Right. And when we got back to Hereford months later, it'd been overtaken by other events, and nobody talked about the Iranian embassy. It was just, it
was just a job.
Just a job.
Yeah. So at this point, you're a captain. Are you in charge of
troop commander?
Troop commander.
Yeah, I was mobility troop, which is a method of entry. So you either go into operational area on a vehicle, or by parachute, or by boat, or across the mountain. So those were methods of entry. And I was the mobility troop commander, and there wasn't a great call for mobility sort of flavoured operations then, but after Iraq, the Gulf War, mobility came into its own.
Right.
So I missed that. So but it was great fun because mobility. We rode motorbikes, we drove Land Rovers. I went to learn how to drive a Russian tank because it was Cold War. I went over to Grafenwohr in Germany to familiarise myself with the inside of a Russian tank, because the Americans kept a whole battle group of Russian vehicles to train on.
Okay, yeah. And so beyond that, like I'm just trying to break these down to years to see what you can share, but like 82 to 84?
82 to 84, okay. After the Falklands, for some reason, no officer passed selection, so I was extended.
Okay.
And then...
so was there meant to be just a short period of time as an officer?
Yeah, exactly, 3 years, and that goes past very quickly. So I should have gone back to my unit, but I was allowed to stay on an extra year, so I stayed on as a squadron second in command to the squadron that had done the Iranian embassy. So I was surrounded by all those guys, and even then nobody boasted about it. But I remember one fun occasion when we were doing VIP visits. So we had a visit from Prince Charles and Lady Diana. They hadn't even got married, and they were coming because of the Iranian embassy. They wanted to see how the SAS had done this sort of thing. So there's a mock-up buildings, and we dressed up Prince Charles in a black suit and Lady Di in a black suit, made them part of the SWAT team, and then on a second demo, Prince Charles flew the helicopter, and another helicopter was flying along, and Lady Di with her friend was watching on the ground, and the boys were coming in underslung on an underslung cargo net, so that the way of getting people onto a high building, rather than going up through the stairs, they were just dropped onto the top. So as this helicopter came across the top of the embassy, it was called, a body peeled off and fell, twirling in free fall, and just slapped into the top of the roof. And Lady Di and her friend were absolutely, eyes out on stalks. And at the time, that MASH theme was playing "Suicide is Painless," so it was complete farce that we were putting on for them. And then this bloke stood up on the roof, patting himself down and shaking his head as though, I survived that. And of course, they never knew we'd had a guy hiding on the roof. They actually thought that somebody had fallen out of the helicopter.
Fantastic.
So we were having fun.
Yeah.
We were at play then. I think with Princess Anne, we had a pantomime horse. I had to go and hire from the theatre the donkey, and one of the boys was sitting on the donkey, firing his MP5 into the targets. Princess Anne, took about 5 seconds to understand that was a joke. She actually thought this is how they acted. And when she laughed, then everyone else roared with laughter, but it was frozen for a second in horrific, she hasn't got it.
Some great memories there, right?
Yeah, I know, some good stories. There's some.
That's good. So you mentioned you get extended by another year.
Yep.
So this takes us up to around 84.
Yeah.
You've probably done a lot of tasks,
Yeah.
a lot of jobs here, a lot of jobs there. Do you stay on, or do you actually go back to RGJ?
I went back. I had done a training team. The counter-terrorist team in Dubai needed refreshing, so I had done that. And then
So you'd gone out there?
I'd gone out to Dubai to train them on the ground.
Okay.
And then my tour was up and I went back to the Green Jackets. And I was sitting in Minden in Germany as the intelligence officer of my battalion. And it started to filter back that Dubai needed their bodyguard refreshed. And they wanted someone to stay on. And so I started sort of saying, well, I'll do that. And so within 6 months, I was pulled out of the RGJ, put back into Hereford. So I wasn't officially on the Hereford books, but I was on the team job. And I was the guy who then stayed on afterwards for continuity in a junior staff officer's capacity.
Okay.
And I was the chief instructor of the Royal Bodyguard for 2 years.
Wow.
Which I couldn't have done if I hadn't been in the Hereford system.
Right, gotcha. And do you think that helped because you have in that second language background?
No, it helped mainly because I'd been on the initial refresher of the counter-terrorist team, so my face was known, and they said, we want that guy to stay.
Got you, okay.
And we had given some of the lessons in Arabic. My Arabic wasn't very good, but when I stayed on for the next 2 years, we were operating every day in Arabic, or I was, and at night, sometimes I go to the Arabic classes. And so my spoken Arabic became pretty slick. Not newsreader style, but good conversational. And for those guys, the bodyguard were real Dubai Arabs. If you go to Dubai now, you won't meet a local, but I was working exclusively with locals, and they were great fun.
So what's that bodyguard aspect? Is that to protect the royals over there?
The ruler, Sheikh Rashid at the time, who was getting on a bit and not very well, but his number 1 squadron was his bodyguard. So they were on duty. They would move with him, and the guy who commanded that, whose name Abdul Hakim somebody, but he had been descended from slave stock, and so he was not a high-born Arab. But people would stand up when he came into a room because he was Sheikh Rashid's number 1 bodyguard. Okay. Very, very nice guy, and a real gentleman. And so I was training his guys, some of whom were incredibly lazy, idle, huge bellies, fingers missing, cast in their eyes, but they had got the job because of their family connection, so they had to be then beaten into shape.
Right. Okay.
And who better to do that than an SAS guy who could shout at them but not offend them.
Yeah. So those 2 years, was it a case of a little bit in the UK and then back out there, or was you out there?
I was out there the whole time.
The whole time.
And hence the Arabic really kicked in.
Got it. Okay.
Because that was Dubai before the boom.
Right.
When there were great big empty spaces. So, it's not the Dubai of today.
Yeah. Okay. So again, doing math, that takes us to around 86,
Correct.
87?
Correct. And then I got the word that I was going back to Hereford as Squadron Commander.
Oh, really?
So I went straight from Dubai to Hereford.
Okay.
I never served with the Green Jackets again.
Really? Okay. So if we were just to take out that bodyguard time frame, during a career of an officer, can you do 3 years at Hereford, go back to unit, and then come back again? Is that a common thing?
No, it's more like you would do the Troop Commander's Tour and then go away and do 2 more jobs and come back as a major once you'd been promoted, maybe 3 more jobs.
Okay, so you'd go back as a different rank, essentially.
Yes, you go back as a major, and again, I'm referring to that time. But to get back as a squadron commander was very, very good because there's only 4 squadrons.
Wow, okay.
So the competition to get those jobs.
Fantastic. And was that a major? You went back?
I went back as a major, yeah.
So was it like posting on promotion type thing?
Yes, yeah. Promotion on posting, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and a major's appointment, bang, squadron commander.
Okay.
But I was still, in career terms, I was still a Green Jacket.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is you going back in like 87, is that right?
Yeah, late 86.
Late 86 into 87.
Yeah.
Is that another 3-year stint?
We normally only supposed to be 2.5, but I got extended in that as well.
Got it.
So I was very lucky.
So as a commander in that position, still very much involved with moving around different parts of the world.
Yeah, you're taking your squadron or deploying your guys in packets to various training tasks operational stuff. Northern Ireland changed slightly. But you were providing the manpower for those tasks if it was lower than a squadron commitment, or you were taking the whole squadron to go and do something. And in case, the exercises, we did exercises in Indonesia, Oman, can't remember where else. I think we did short exercise, like sort of to practice procedures.
Okay.
So like a long range fly in, jump out, or throw the boats out first, jump in after the boats, just to practice, low profile, long range insertions. And that was an exciting training year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One becomes a bit blasé about it, and always took one's fitness for granted.
Right.
But I saw guys almost get badly injured, and it's something that you would know from your own time. If you don't train hard enough, that's when things can go wrong. So, like, good training brings good luck, and accidents get missed by a whisker.
So going back for that second proper tour, essentially of Hereford as a major, did you feel that you were perceived differently because you're there now as the commander?
You're there as a boss who can, you had to plan career moves for your boys, for your senior NCOs who expected you to get it right. And that was quite a fine art of juggling people's expectations with the jobs that were available. And then you could also see a stream of the lads who were clearly very, very talented. Everyone in the SAS has got talent and got independence and sort of focus and drive and a tremendous sense of competition. And out of all of that, you have to pick the guys who are going to go up the ranks faster.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that was your job, as well as that's what I call the pastoral side. But your job was also to come up with imaginative exercises.
Okay, yeah. And was there a moment or an experience that you can share from that time when you were the boss, essentially? Any stand-up moments that you're allowed to?
I can't remember. Probably. If I'm really honest, no. The whole thing was just such a full-on 2 year. It'll come to me, maybe one that come to me, but one from Ireland as a troop commander. We had to put protection onto a hotel that was going to be firebombed. That was the int. And so I did the recce and saw that there was a bar and a public bar, snug bar or saloon bar, and then there was a restaurant upstairs. And I went back and briefed the boys and said, we're going to put so-and-so into a couple of guys into the pub, obviously dressed in civilian. And those are the years of long hair, mutton chops, suits with huge lapels. Then we'll put two of the smarter guys who didn't look like thugs would go into the saloon bar. Then the guys who really dipped out with the blokes had to sit in the van totally silent for about 8 hours, peeing into cans or they were really, by the time they heard that was their job, they were not happy. And then I announced that I would be in the restaurant because, I'm an officer and, clearly know how to dress, and I won't be eating my peas off my knife. And that furthermore, I would have a young lady as my companion. And by this time, the boys were really listening to every word because I had explained that you just don't have two gorillas sitting in a restaurant staring into each other's eyes. That's not good. Not a good look. And it would stand out like crazy to the IRA if they had anybody in that restaurant also dining. They'd be able to spot them. But what they won't spot is a very handsome officer and a gorgeous girl. The cue for laughter from the boys. And then the door opened and the most gorgeous policewoman came in. She was absolutely knockout. And the scorn from the floor was palpable because I was taking her to dinner. And she smuggled in my pistol and the radio and everything. And we had a great dinner. And I'd also said to her name was Deborah, I think. So, Deborah, if nothing happens, we go into the car park and we make like lovers until about 3 o'clock in the morning. And then we call it off. We pull off. And meanwhile, the guys in the van would have been sitting next to where we were parked because they were the safety on my car. And anyway, Deborah and I went through the meal, and you can't have a meal without a glass of wine because that looks suspicious. And I think I was telling all this to the boys as well, because I could feel that I was winding them up. And so Deborah and I went through the meal and had the bottle of wine, which I drank most of because she was also quite sort of overawed by the whole thing. And then nothing happened, and so we went down to the car park and sat in the car, and for about 2 minutes sort of looked at each other, and then and we had to stop every so often to clear the windscreen because it was steaming up. Meanwhile, the boys were in the van, and we all recovered to our base about 5 o'clock in the morning, and the guys were saying, you can't go to the restaurant tomorrow night, boss, because that's wrong, because it's too obvious. It will be Billy. So they that's a kangaroo court-martialed me out of that job and said, Billy, who is Irish, he will be the guy. And Billy, of course, didn't really have a suit. And so I said, fine, no, absolutely fine. And anyway, the next afternoon, as we were deploying, the tallest, most broad Irish policewoman in the force walked in. And, Allah would have said he'd blessed her in other ways than beauty. And I was absolutely in stitches. And so were the boys, because Billy was looking really uncomfortable. No, Billy. So anyway.
Yeah.
But Squadron Commander moment, just the general satisfaction of seeing something that had gone well. And it was always quite tense, as I said, people with such high expectations, and you had to get it right. But overall satisfaction.
Brilliant.
To have served and to have done the job was one hell of a thing.
Yeah.
Privilege.
Yeah. So this takes us to roughly what year when you...
This was 89.
89?
Then I was posted to Italy as a staff officer.
Okay.
To Allied Forces South, AF South, which was not what I was designed for.
Right.
Sitting...
What part is that?
That's NATO Special Forces.
NATO, right.
Unconventional military ops, UMO. And that was forward planning for a Cold War that was no longer happening.
Got it, yeah.
So it was just, I couldn't see the point of it, but the career point of it was that I had to do an SO2, a Staff Officer's Grade 2 job.
Okay.
And if I'm looking back now, they did me a favour by posting me to Italy, because it was time. I was just married, time with my wife, no kids, Italy, great place. But the job was so awful.
Right.
And I got over emotional about that particular aspect, and that led me to resign.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. And was that meant to be like a 2-year stint?
That should have been a 2.5 year job.
Right.
But I'd also reached the earliest pensionable age. So I waited for a year until my pension would have been eligible for a pension, and then I resigned.
Okay.
So
was that a difficult decision?
Not,
or because of the way that being in that SO2 job?
Yeah, it had driven my morale down, and maybe I wasn't in a good enough, objective enough frame of mind. But I only really joined the Army for adventure.
Right.
I didn't see myself as a field marshal.
Okay.
I didn't really see myself. I was just happy with what I got, and when I wanted something, if it was within reach, I would go for it. And by the time you reach 38 in the British Army, your active days are beginning to drop back. Mm-hmm. You can still get it, but it's very, very unusual.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And when I look back now at the ripe old age of 69, I was absolutely spot on, because there's plenty of adventure outside.
Got it. So you mentioned resignation. Is that the word you used?
Yeah, resign your commission.
So you decline your commission.
Resign
your commission. Yeah. And that's essentially for normal squaddies signing off.
Correct.
So do you have to give a year like we would?
No. I think I did it. I think I wrote my letter and let the wheels kick in, and it was basically, okay, you can leave on this date, find a replacement. We'll find a replacement.
All right.
And I was replaced eventually by an ex-SAS officer who I think enjoyed it. So, it's horses for courses.
So it sounded like that was a quick turnaround from having a letter into
yes,
being
it
a
was.
civilian.
Only 3 or 4 months.
Yeah. And so had you at that point had a mindset of what you'd like to do
No.
as a civilian? Because obviously you've been in since 71.
Yeah.
And this is now late 80s, right?
Correct.
Is
Correct.
this into the 90s?
No, it was late 80s.
Late 80s, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'd been institutionalized.
Mm.
And the safest thing to do was run to another institution. So I got in touch with Sultan Special Forces, who were really only interested in SAS officers. And they said, yeah, okay, we'll come and be with us. And I think I had to spend a year in the Omani police before the slot became available in the Sultan's Special Force.
Okay, so it's called Sultan Special Force.
Yeah.
Right. And they're based out in Oman?
Down in the south of Oman.
Okay.
Comprised of Dofaris, because there's a Dhofar province. And the war in Oman had its beginnings down in Dhofar, where the Dofaris felt that they were not getting the spoils of the oil wealth under the old Sultan. And so when the new Sultan deposed his dad, there was a full-blown insurrection down in Dhofar, stirred by the communists across the border in Yemen. And that insurrection would have started in 67, 70-ish, 67, 68. So to cut that long story short, by the time I got there, much, much later, post-war, the wealth had spread down to the south. The south was sort of pacified, but the boys who had been fighting in the war had been turned by the Brits, by the SAS, and they either became the Furka Force, which is like an Arab name for a group, and they went back out to either tell their brothers to stop fighting or actually fight them. So you're either going to come in peacefully or we're going to come and get you. And this eventually led to the formation of Sultan Special Force, where these people could be uniformed, put on the payroll. So I commanded that regiment, and there were probably about 400 Omani Dofaris, no Northerners, British officers, some Nepalese officers, Gurkhas. But we had a different set of rules. The guys could leave camp with their M16s. They dressed differently from Northern Omanis, spoke a different language, and they wanted British fair play. They didn't want any Northern Omani shenanigans.
Okay.
So we were the right people for that job. And if you'd been SAS, and I spoke Arabic, so.
Yeah. Had you heard about this from your time over there?
I'd heard of, not really SSF, but I'd heard of the war in Oman. I even tried to go there on loan service.
Okay.
But I didn't get it.
Oh, right.
But SSF was a wonderful invention because it kept they were proud to be in SSF. The selection for SSF was quite tough. And they had a great reputation. They passed top of all the courses, and I think the Sultan's mother came from Oman, so there was a great many boxes were being ticked. It was putting money through the payroll into the Jebel communities. I wasn't just a CO; I was sitting astride a pan-tribal group. So there'd be Bedou, there would be mountain men, there would be coastal men, all different tribal names. And under normal circumstances in the war, they'd have been fighting each other. But under SSF, under the banner of SSF, it's called the Katiba, the battalion. And in Dhofar, you're always asking a guy, what's your name? And you might be Saif who? Saif bin Mohammed. Okay, yeah, Saif bin Mohammed. Beit Tabuk, the house of Tabuk. So I would say to the boys, which bait are you in? Or, and they go, I bait this, bait that. And so I'm Beit Katiba. I'm the house of the battalion, which is pan-tribal. Not everyone was impressed by that, but I thought it was quite funny at the time. But I got some differing responses from the Arabs who'd never heard of the Katiba.
Right. So
but I had a role in the community, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. So when you reached out to them to join, did you have to go through some sort of training, or were they we know what you've been through?
Correct.
We know your history.
Yeah. When can you start?
Really like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you go in? Did you go in as a major? Or?
I went as a colonel.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, I went as a CO, as the commanding officer, straight in and I had to get my wings, my parachute wings, fast because they wore them on the uniform. So I did 3 jumps in one day up at thumb rate.
Okay. Yeah.
Where the air is thinner.
Yeah.
And you come in a lot faster. And actually, somebody watching, he actually saw me bounce as I.
Oh.
And I couldn't lose face and say, okay, I'll do my next jumps next time around. I had to do all 3 on that day.
Wow.
So that's a standout moment. That really hurt.
Yeah, I bet.
Landing on that rock hard ground, no nice sand to fall into. Step, you're in that area where it's just dry and hard.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a great. I look back on that with regret because I was probably the last Christian non-national to command an operational. You would have had lots of advisors after me, people who give advice to the Arabs, and on some days they don't want any advice, and so go back and twiddle your thumbs. Where I was the sort of kick-ass commanding officer, promoted them, demoted them.
Okay.
And also, like I say, in the community, went to the funerals, went to the weddings. We had a guy killed in a parachuting accident, and they have to be, under their system, they are bodies washed, cleaned, and buried that day. And so I heard about this, and my ops officer, who was an Omani, said, you need to be at the burial. So I went down with him into the middle of Salalah, where the cemetery is, and there was a huge gathering. Everybody was there. Everyone was there to pay their respects. And I had an imam in the battalion, in the regiment. So his rank was sergeant major. He only came to me not about religious matters. He came to me about complaining about his pay. But on that day, he was earning his pay, and he had long hair. And he was standing at the grave, and he saw me at the back because I thought, I'm not a Muslim, and he just waved me forward. So I was at the grave side as the poor chap was being lowered in. And that sort of brings up these guys were, yes, they were Muslims, but not once in 2.5, 3 years was I ever buttonholed by one of them saying, you're a Christian, I'm not going to obey you, and I don't like Christians. These guys judged you on your, how good your heart was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that feeds into my story later on. But like I say, I was harsh with them, but they never, ever played the religion card on me.
That's good.
Yeah.
So what year did you go out there?
That would have been 90.
1990, yeah.
90, a year in the police, then 91.
Oh, right. So you did
a year in the police, which is a police special tasks.
As a sort of officer?
No, as a colonel there.
Oh, colonel, right, in the police ranks.
Yeah. I don't know what that is, but
yeah.
it wasn't my sort of best year. I mean, it was fine.
So in some ways, that's kind of like your training. In some ways,
yeah, I got my Arabic up to speed. We had a big role with the counter-terrorist response, and it gave me a chance to see the Sultan Special Forces fellow officers and get to know the HQ.
Yeah,
and get me ready for going down to Salalah.
Right. So that takes you to 91, and
Correct.
Then you said 2.5.
2.5 years, 91, and then I was I had to hand over to an Omani, and then I became the colonel of the training regiment because lots of Omanization was going on, and my argument was that if we're beaten out of the command post, we can regroup as the training, so like the school of excellence for the Sultan Special Forces, and have all the Brit instructors in there, and that idea was accepted. So I was the CEO of that for about a year, and then probably they had said, okay, Alex can come up north, be a staff officer. And really, they were probably looking for more up-to-date staff college trained staff officers. And so I was made redundant, and which wasn't traumatic. I was almost ready to go. And my wife had started a business in Salalah, which, is still functioning today in many other forms. So we had things to look. We're still young. By now had 2 kids. So Oman was a fantastic chapter for us, but not a place that I would have stayed on indefinitely, because you just sort of hit a ceiling there.
Okay.
But it was a great experience.
So when we talk about transition,
Yeah,
you essentially transitioned from the British Army.
correct.
You didn't transition to Civvy Street.
Correct.
You essentially transitioned to.
I went back to the womb.
Would you class that as the Omani Army? The SSF was part of
We belong to the palace.
the palace. Okay.
We belong to the palace.
So I don't know the structure at all.
No, don't worry. It's like the Army and Navy and Air Force are under the Ministry of Defence, the Omani Ministry of Defence. We came under the Ministry of the Palace Office. But we would have, had there been conflict in Oman, we would have been operational alongside the Omani Army.
Right. Okay. And then you finish your time with them, and then that's your transition. Is
Correct.
that?
Yeah. I knew you were going to ask that. I have been sort of averse to transitioning to civilian life, and managed to get away with it because we returned to England. My wife was concentrating on her business, and I thought, well, I need to get money. So I then phoned the companies up in London, the security, because it was just beginning. The security industry was in its infancy when I was a troop commander, but it was quite well established in the 90s. And I was offered a job in Algeria, because I said, send me somewhere dangerous where I can speak Arabic. There's Algeria for you. So I went to Algeria, got paid handsomely, but it was desperately dull. And that's where I thought, I don't really want to be in the security industry if this is what it's like. I mean, with hindsight now, obviously that was my chance to grasp it and then form my own company, but I wasn't interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
So halfway through that, I said, I'm not, don't send me any more of these. I came back to England and I did the Foreign Office interviews for the European Community Monitoring Mission, which was in Bosnia, and got selected for that and got paid very well. And so I was in Bosnia sort of 6 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And
as a what?
As an observer.
As an observer, okay.
So at that time in Bosnia, the Bosnian conflict was more than halfway through. Dayton was on the Dayton Agreement was on the horizon, and the UN still held sway, and supposedly, and the European Community Monitoring Mission was there to observe ceasefires, prisoner exchanges, body handing over of bodies, and so to keep an eye on any agreements that had to be monitored. That was good. That was interesting, and that was, if you try to explain Bosnia to somebody in a cold, you'd get lost. But you just needed a week or so out there to think, okay, there's 3 competing religions, 3 religions and 3 cultures squabbling over the same turf, and it's dressed up as a war. I mean, it was a bloody and a vicious war, and I don't know if people remember it anymore, but you probably would do if you came from there. And so I did that for 6 months, and then fell into the trap of going back to the security companies, went back to Algeria. But after a while, I was phoning my wife and saying, what are you doing? And she's saying, well, I'm doing this show and that show, but I've got no one to look after the kids. I said, I'll come and look after the kids. So came back. was lucky enough for then the next few years to do the odd consultancy job while we got my wife's business up and running, and I got to take my kids to school every day and pick them up. So I saw my kids grow up.
Okay.
But that was in the period 95 onwards. So around about 1999, the SS said, "Do you want to? If there's something going on in Kosovo, are you interested?" I got permission from my wife.
Okay.
So I signed on again for 6 months.
Okay. So you signed on to...
I went on to 21 SS's books.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
And from 21 SS, they then officially loaned me to 22.
Right, right.
And I was in the ops room in Macedonia and then in Pristina when they went across.
Okay, okay. So again, you did a little bit with 2-1 as well.
Yeah.
So.
No, I didn't. I never saw a day with 2-1.
Oh, you did not? Oh, you just on the books?
Just on the books.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. So when does this take us up to now? So are we in the early 2000s?
We're in 99.
We're in 99.
We're in 99
okay.
because the operation in Bosnia, in Kosovo, finished. The SF part of it was very successful. And you've never seen any books about it, or no one's correct. So by that time, they had got the sort of the security under control.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a fascinating operation. And the only little thing I took away personally was that, again, I was an oldie in a room. And I can still do some of this. And I was at a briefing very early on where the big general Mike Jackson was giving a lecture, not a briefing to people, and there were journos. And as he left, his next guy said, "Okay, any questions?" And somebody said, one of the journos said, "How many men in a brigade?" I thought, okay, fair, and got an answer. And 6 months later, I was at a briefing, same general, same, I don't know if it was the same journos, but another bunch of journos. And somebody said, and we by this stage, NATO had gone into Kosovo, flushed out the paramilitaries, all the baddies had gone. All the Kosovar refugees who'd been hunkered down in Macedonia had all gone back. Textbook operation. And at the press conference, I don't even know if it's the same journal, but a hand went up and said, "How many men in a brigade?" So it was this sort of, I thought, I can ask better questions than that. And so I then got the idea that I would be in the press corps, and this would be a good place to sort of observe the world for a bit, and maybe even get paid.
Okay.
And so, talking about resettlement and coming back into, I never did it. I sort of dodged around. The Americans call it feeding the beast. That you've got to be somewhere adventurous. Never, ever do a 9 to 5.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so very shortly after that, the Twin Towers came down. I was a magistrate in Cheltenham, sitting in court, came into the retiring room and somebody said, "Have you heard what's happening in America?" And I no, and Twin Towers had come down. And so it was obvious that the punishment of Al-Qaeda was now rolling.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone was talking about Afghanistan. And I had a friend in London. I said, "Di, fix it. I need to go to Afghanistan." And he fixed up a lunch in a nice restaurant. This could be a setting for a book. A guy who had been a proper photographer, ex-army, and a guy who'd run guns into the Mujahideen during the Soviet time for MI6. And they were at the lunch. And they said, "Well, we're going next week. And, if you think you can hack it, you're welcome to come along." I thought, that's a challenge. That sounds like a challenge. So again, I asked my wife and she said, "Be home for Christmas." So I went out with those guys. I went to Jessop's in the high street, bought a camera, trying to figure out how to work it, and went with a whole roll of, bag of film. Thanks to my two mates, we were with the governor of Jalalabad, whose son was commanding a group of Mujahideen at Tora Bora in that mountain area. And so we were sort of red carpeted, flew into Islamabad, got a ride from Islamabad into Jalalabad, so up through the Khyber Pass. Khyber Pass, we saw loads of Mujahideen prisoners, Taliban prisoners, sorry. You got the whiff that this was a country in ferment. And in Jalalabad, the governor put us up in his rather nice, palatial villa. It wasn't luxurious, but you could tell he was a man who was well off. And his son saying, get up here. So we ended up going up into the mountains sometimes not every day, but when there was something happening. So we were up there, and it was Ramadan. And I was, because I spoke Arabic, I was communicating in Arabic with the Afghans. So not all of them spoke English. And one thing that I remember was the Afghans on our side, the Mujahideen, were talking to the Al-Qaeda guys on the other side of the valley on the walkie-talkies, and they were speaking in Arabic, and the Mujahideen were saying, inviting them to iftar, breaking the fast as the sun goes down. And all this chat was going on just for as long as they could chat in order for the early war, the electronic eavesdropping planes to get a location, which of course the Al-Qaeda guys didn't know about. And then suddenly the whole mountain would erupt as a bomb strike went in, and then there'd be a tentative inquiry from the Mujahideen going, Armour, his name was Armour. I never ever, knew. Armour, are you still there? And Armour by this stage is furious because he'd just been bombed. So he wasn't coming to sit with us and break bread. But, and we went up way to the areas which had been bombed, and there was bandages, trees, ammunition lying around, bloody bandages, but they'd got all their people away. And we went to bin Laden's house in Jalalabad.
Okay.
Walked around Osama bin Laden's house.
Okay.
Picking stuff up. I got a few souvenirs from there, and there was a hair in the plug hole of the shower. Of course, nowadays that would be great DNA stuff, but you just shambling around, sort of trying to figure it out. I mean, there was a wall straight through the house, as though the builders had come in and built a wall. There must have been some reason for it. But he had gone up. Bin Laden was rumoured, and pretty solid rumours, because these guys were watching. They had previously been his hosts until the Al-Qaeda romance with the Taliban had gone sour. Or the Mujahideen, rather. The Mujahideen were fed up with Al-Qaeda. And when the Twin Towers went down, they knew we've got to be seen to be kicking these people out. So anyway, that was a interesting time. Al-Qaeda prisoners brought down the mountain, photographed them, listened to them, and all too soon that time was up, and so I had to heed my wife's
Get back for
advice.
Christmas.
Yeah, got back for Christmas.
So that's early 2000s.
That is early 2000, and there was an Abu Dhabi TV film crew in Jalalabad, and they got my number.
Right. So what, they wanted you to do a bit of work for them?
Yeah. That's what happened. So
okay. So subsequent years beyond that, obviously we're 2022 now.
Yeah.
Have you pretty much just been doing a bit of photography, or what have you been up to? For the last
my photography is a work in progress. I learned that if you should get a really good camera and a really good lens, even better lens. And Abu Dhabi TV called me, and I reported for them during the Iraq War, 2003.
You did, okay.
Went up from Qasr up into. I only really got as far as Nasiriyah, but I was with there was a press group that was supposed to go and see weapons of mass destruction, which of course we now all know didn't exist. We didn't know then. We thought, where are they? And from that group, I cross-decked to 16 Air Assault Brigade, because I knew the brigade commander and Colonel Tim Collins, the who gave the famous speech. So I went with him, zipping around as his battle group liberated villages and cleared off whatever remnants of the Iraqi Republican Guard there were. Whatever president, I don't know, the so-called elite, but they were in no mood for fighting. And that came to an end, and then I came back to Cheltenham to cool off, and then I got various requests from Abu Dhabi TV to go out to Afghanistan and embed with their guys or get their team reporters in. So that was quite a good income, as well as being able to be back at home most of the time and look after the kids and help my wife.
Okay. So have you pretty much just been doing that kind of on and off jobs?
Yes, I'm afraid to say I was a magistrate, but you don't get paid for that. It's not a career. We were very busy, my wife and I, and then as time went on, she acquired a good team. So I was less and less, training in colour coordination wasn't part of the SS curriculum. So I was less and less important to her business. And I had this idea of writing and basically picking off good little consultancy jobs. There was very early on, there was a job with Jane's Information to try and replay how Al-Qaeda would poison the drinking water in the Virginia area. And a friend and I went out and did that. It was, looking back, it was a little bit bizarre, but at the time it was all part of the reality of where will Al-Qaeda strike next, and the drinking supply was a potential target. So it was things like that, unusual stuff I responded to.
Okay. So you kept busy. But,
kept busy. I could have worked a lot in the security industry, but it would have taken me away from home, and I didn't want that.
So if that really brings us up to date in a roundabout way, obviously we've all as a world gone through something together. I'm not going to say it. We all know what that is. And did that time, in some ways downtime, spark anything for you to do that's a little bit different than what you've done in the past? Maybe to do with pages?
Yes. I had an idea that I couldn't get out of my head. It started in Bosnia, and we were in a speaking to an old lady, and as we were speaking to her, the interpreter was speaking to her, a cow wandered out of the garden, through the house, past our little group, and disappeared through another door. And I realised that people's lives had been devastated, and there was a mosque with a fallen minaret. So there's clearly ethnic cleansing in a Muslim area. And I had the idea for a book and wrote it. Took me years. And sent the manuscript into the MOD. They went crazy, sequestered it for a year. I was made to talk to their lawyers. So that particular idea is still gathering dust.
Okay.
But I had the confidence of knowing I could go from beginning to end, and it wasn't a bad story. So the idea of writing fiction wouldn't go away. And then I had another experience where I was walking down the Falls Road with Tim Collins, long after the peace agreement, with I think Tim and his guys were running a contract in Afghanistan, but this involved me going with them on a visit, and we were walking down the Falls Road, and on the left was all these drinking places with murals, the tricolour and something in Gaelic, and then curiously something in Arabic. And I realised, I was told, well, this is because the Provisionals or the IRA identifies with the Palestinian struggle. So an Arab-Irish dimension sort of flickered up. And then on the right, as we were going down that street, there was a big tablet of, dedicated to the honour those killed in the struggle against the Brits. I mean, the Falls Road was once a very dangerous place. We wouldn't be walking down there normally, but nowadays you can. And but up on the name, up on this plaque were all these names, and the retired policeman pointed and said, "Informer, informer, informer." So, off the 10 people on this plaque, third of them had been police informers. Obviously, they had met a sticky end, being commemorated by their own guys, but what their own guys didn't know, that they'd been ratting out IRA missions. I'd been, critical players in the war of information. And that flickered up in my mind. And then from being a magistrate, I'd seen how weak our system is. And I thought, if any of my Omanis were sitting here and that guy who'd robbed that old lady, they just wouldn't let him out. He would be given the most almighty flogging, if he was lucky. And then the key would be thrown away to his cell. So, the Arabs, the Muslims have a different attitude to it. So this whole idea of my book came up. And it took me a long time to write it. I wasn't trained reader, but I had the confidence of having done a manuscript before. And again, the memory of having, the Omanis say, we don't care what religion you are as long as you're straight. And also out in the desert in Afghanistan with an Emirati title, you're the only Christian for hundreds of miles. And never once was I worried that, my safety might be at risk with my companions. I'm still great friends with some of these guys.
Okay. So you've written this book. The book's called The Devil's Magistrate. His past is always present.
Yeah.
And I'm going to read just a little, what do you call it when someone else has written a little summary?
An endorsement.
An endorsement. There we go. So I've actually got an endorsement here from Andy McNabb. And he's written, Alex knows what he is writing about. He's been there and done it. I'm proud to have soldiered with him. So to have someone like Andy, Andy McNabb, say that's pretty good. Is there anything else you want to say about this book and an oversight on what might be in here that might entice people to give it a purchase?
I would only say it is not the standard SAS agent or retired SAS guy with a kidney stomping, larynx crushing of the bad guy's story. It's a story, and storytelling is my game, of the war against Al Qaeda, but from the perspective of turned terrorists, both Irish and Libyan. So it's the other side guys who are taking the war to Al Qaeda.
Right.
And that's my experience too. All of these campaigns, the informer, the person who passes on intelligence is a key player, but very rarely recognized. In fact, the bottom endorsement is a guy who was in Al Qaeda for 8 or 9 years, and he was turned by MI6.
Yeah. Okay.
And he gave me an endorsement as well.
Am I pronouncing it right?
Eamon Dean.
Eamon Dean.
Yeah.
MI6's former top spy inside Al Qaeda,
Yeah.
and he wrote a vivid portrayal of a man whose past obliges him to find a way, though the private terrors and shifting loyalties of the secret world. The author clearly knows his subject. So some really good
endorsements.
Good endorsements there. And where can people purchase?
That's on Amazon, or the publisher is 9 Elms.
9 Elms.
But Amazon would be your easiest route.
Okay, wonderful stuff. Well, Alex, it's been a brilliant time having you on the show. It is that time of the podcast where we give the guest the opportunity to give advice from themselves. So the first bit of advice would be for people that are thinking about joining the military. Might not be the army, might be the Navy, Air Force, and it might also be British. It might be elsewhere around the world. Have you got any advice for those people that are thinking of joining?
I certainly would do it. Your time would not be wasted. It will make you a better person, boy, girl, or whatever. Service to your country is important. You can never be ashamed of it, and you'll make some great friends. So it's a wonderful phase that you can choose to go through, and I would commend it to anybody.
Fantastic. Some good advice there. Now, I know you are technically a veteran, but it sounds like you'd never really transitioned fully. But have you got advice for veterans, be those maybe about to transition or been a veteran for a while?
We are lucky in Britain that we have reunions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have a German father-in-law who fought through Hitler's war. They don't have reunions, or if they did before, they certainly don't now. They have no one to turn to. Reunions are a cathartic, decompressing process, and you've got to stay in touch with your family. And in fact, the British military is very family orientated in its approach. And when you leave it, there's an element of bereavement, and don't be frightened to admit you've got a problem. Stick with your group, your veterans group, or whatever your old mates. The world doesn't owe you a living, which might be a trap that people fall into. Civilian life is full of trouble. There's no second prize. You don't get a prize for coming second in the civvy street. You just fall on hard times. But I'm not a particularly religious person, but if you have strong faith, that might have taught you that there's always something that's going to pick you up and help pick you up, rather.
Mm-hmm.
You're never alone. You've got to make that first move, admit what might be troubling you, confront it. But I would be very, very wary of self-pity leading to a sense of victimhood. I've never had it because, as you rightly say, I've never really left, and it's that awful expression of feeding the beast. When I've gone out and I've fed, and then I've come back into the family group. But I treasure my SAS reunions.
Okay.
Where rank means nothing.
Okay.
And if you've got that quality of reunion, and like the Green Jackets have great reunions, so it's like your squadron in the engineers,
Mm-hmm.
or your probably squadron, I would have said. Yeah, squadron reunions. There's no SAS regimental reunion. It's too many people, but your squadron, it's been an intense time, and you naturally gravitate to your squadron. Yeah, difficult for people who because everything's more technical, and you probably have to have more skills. But then maybe the younger generation would be joining the army services with those skills anyway.
Mm.
You have to have your wits about you, because there isn't going to be a sergeant major there to tell you to shine your boots.
Yeah.
Metaphorically speaking, you got to do it all yourself.
You do it yourself. Yeah. Yeah.
Not easy.
No, it isn't. It isn't easy.
Not
but
easy.
No, some good advice there. Good advice. Thank you. So yeah, that does bring us to the end. How was it for you coming on the show and sharing your stuff?
Well, very good, very good. I've got the impression I did too much talking, but
No.
you've given me a chance to, the podcast will live on, and if I was to get thrown under a bus tomorrow, then at least my kids will have something to see, and it's good that it's in the visual form as well, because not everybody reads written stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah,
so it's animated, and they got my face.
Yeah.
So it's a great concept, and I'm so grateful to you, Gavin.
No problem. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And yeah, it's been great. So yeah, thank you so much for everything you shared. What you've gone through during your service and beyond. And also for your time. We don't have infinite amount of it. Like you said, the buses are around the corner potentially. Yeah. But thank you for giving some of your time today and inviting me up here.
My pleasure, Gavin.
Fantastic. Right. And last but not least, I say this to all my guests, thank you for your service.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it. No problem. This has been Military Veterans Podcast. Out.